everyone, and welcome back to the Colour Cave, where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Jem, and as promised, today we are going to do a little bit of exploring with this Pencilmarch Watercolour paper. I picked a 2-pack of these up on Amazon a little while back. I can't remember exactly how much I paid, but I'll put the price here for you. And the reason that I am trying this paper today is it was a suggestion given to me by the lovely Julia Kay at Julia Kay Art Studios, and if anybody knows about watercolour stuff, it's Julia. If you'd like to watch her make paint and see all things Swedish, she does have a vlog channel here on YouTube. I'll leave that link down in the description for you. It will be the top link in the description, and you can go and check her out because we have got her to thank for this today. So the reason that this paper is important is this is the expert grade paper. They do a student grade paper as well. This paper is 50% cotton, which is always a nice thing to have, and it's also dual-sided, so what they're saying is you can paint on both sides and you will get watercolour paper performance, and that's really what I'm interested to try out. It is listed as cold press paper though. Bearing that in mind, I am putting the other pad of this. There's 30 sheets, like it's a lot of paper in a pad. I do have the other one of these up for sale in the stash shop today, along with a few other bits and pieces, some of which are quality used art supplies for you to peruse. So as per usual, you can check them out over in the stash shop at this address here and pick yourself up a little bargain. Maybe just treat yourself. So what I have done here is I have split one of these A4 sheets in half and I have flipped it over. So on this side of the paper is the rough grain, which I would say was the proper cold press side, and on this half here I have flipped it over and this is the smoother side. I wouldn't say, just from touchy feely, because you know I'll like that kind of thing, just from touching it, it doesn't feel as smooth as hot press paper, but it's definitely a lot smoother than this side. So what I wanted to do was kind of put the paper through its paces, because that's what I like to do. I kind of like to batter all types of paper and see if it does what it says it does, but I thought it would be nice to see the comparison and how our paintbrush behaves on both sides of this paper. Excuse me, I need to put my sleeves down. It is super cold here today. We haven't gone above freezing today, and I'm kind of feeling it a wee bit here in the cave. So the best way to test this, I always find with watercolour paper, the best way to see whether it's worth anything is to do some washes, and that is exactly what we're going to do. So we're actually going to do 2 fairly simple paintings, and when I say simple, the techniques we're using are not complicated. They're going to be silhouette paintings, but obviously that involves a wash background, which is what we're interested in. So to help us along our way with this journey today, I'm relying on my good old Cotman. So this is the Winsor & Newton Cotman Studio set. So this is the biggest set of their student grade paints that they do. I feel no need for professional grade paints for this particular thing. A lot of the Cotman colours share the same light fast properties as their professional counterparts. I love farting about with this palette, I really do. I prefer watercolour in pans as well, and I'm always a lot more inspired when I see all the colours together. Does anybody else feel like that? I always think that that's really like mega inspiring. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the comments, or whether you like to have, you know, like the palette of the colours that you're using for a particular picture and just have them and nothing else. Would love to hear how other people do that. The reference images that I'm using today, which I'm not going to show you because it's going to kind of spoil the painting, they have come from a Facebook group that specialises in artists who provide their photographs as free reference photos for artists. These pages are great, especially if you like landscapes and animals. So I'm going to leave the link to that group down in the description as well. If you are on Facebook, it's a brilliant resource, even if you're just practicing for yourselves. But what these photographers are saying is you can use their photographs to paint a picture and you can sell it and you don't have to give them any royalties. So really, really nice resource to have. So anyway, I was flicking through there and I found a couple of photos that I thought would be great for this kind of thing. I was panicking there because I was just getting all my bits and pieces. So I've got my watercolour paintbrushes, I've got my palette here, and I've got my little plastic cup of water. I always have a separate jar of water with my paint puck in it, and I couldn't find my paint puck. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start with the rough side of the paper. I'm just putting that on there in case I spill everything everywhere, because that would be bad. So I am going to start today with a little bit of moisture on my palette. Got this whopping great big Jackson's Raven brush here. Oh, it's nice. I don't think I want a mop brush for my washes, honestly. Well, I kind of do, but I don't. I don't know why, but see, when I feel it, when I have this brush, I feel as if I should be in Harry Potter or something. It feels quite medieval. I've got no... I don't know why I feel like I should be in Harry. It just looks like an implement that belongs in Harry Potter. That's the way I feel about it. I'm gonna start with this little mop brush here. So this is a Pro Art Master Stroke Series 65L Lunar Mop, and it is in medium. And I'm gonna use this to put a layer of water all over this entire piece of paper. Oh, there's bits of pippy hairs on it. Oh, goodness me. Cover the whole area. And I'm going to take a little bit of yellow ochre here. So this is us employing our wet and wet technique, obviously. Paper's wet, paintbrush is wet, paint's wet, it's all wet. So being fairly generous with the water here as well, because I want to see how the paper's going to cope. And so far so good. I can feel it like pulling up, like there's a little bit of a wrinkle in it there. And down the bottom here, gonna get a little bit of alizarin crimson on the go. Not too much now though. I feel as if I want a little sort of point of colour down here. I'm interested to see how this dries, because it seems to me that things are quite static on this paper. There isn't a lot of movement between the colour. You know, it's not sort of, you know, decided to take a little trip across the paper or anything. Which, when the paper's lying flat like this, I suppose it's not gonna do a huge amount, really, is it? But I was expecting some sort of I don't know, some sort of movement. Maybe I'll just get excited, like, oh, see what happens if I do that. Reminds me of rhubarb and custard for some reason. There's a lot of things reminding me of a lot of things today, isn't there? Okay, so I'm going to switch up brushes now. This is very, very absorbent, so we're sort of accidentally lifting here, which is what we don't need. We don't need to know what that at all. So I'm going to shift to a synthetic brush, and most of you will know by now I am a huge fan of the Sea White synthetic brushes. And here is my old faithful. This is the original number 6 Sea White brush. It's fared pretty well. I did mention just before Christmas I am actually going to replace this soon. It's only just starting to lose its shape. It's about 3 and a bit years old, and I have used this brush for everything, and I have used it most times I paint. So, and I would say that they represent a pretty good value for money in terms of what they actually cost, because these brushes are dirt cheap. Like, they are dirt cheap. If you're in the market for a synthetic brush, I know they're not to everyone's tastes, especially these little nylon, well, that was white originally. You know, I know they're not everybody's cup of tea, but if you are, I would highly recommend the Sea White ones, because I wouldn't say I'm particularly gentle or kind to my brushes. I look after them well. I wouldn't say I'm particularly gentle with them, and this one especially stood the test of time really well. And that's the reason I sell them in the stash shop. I wouldn't sell anything that I don't have 100% faith in. So, you know, I've been putting a fair bit of paint down now. And the paper's taken the paint and the water really well. I was expecting a little bit more travel, but I'm also enjoying the texture here as well. If I zoom in a little bit in this top corner here, it's perfect. You can see the texture of the paper quite nicely there. And I am also into that. Also into that. Okay, so while we're still damp in this middle part here as well, I am going to grab one of my favourite colours, and that is a Payne's Grey. I'm going to water it right down, like really water it down. So I don't want to go crazy with this, I just want a little bit of something in here. Alright, so we're dry on both sides now, which is great. That is exactly what we want. So we're going to do something a bit fun. I'm going to turn this away, and I'm going to cover up this top half because we need to. And I'll just put that on there, and that gives us a chance to work here. So this has turned out quite interesting, and this is one of the things I really like about just slapping paint down and see what it wants to do. This really dark blue mark here, that is where we had our pippy hair. And it's left this really nice mark, which is quite odd but cool at the same time. I want to add a little bit more colour to this, and I'm going to grab the indigo, because you can see here there's lots of light areas, and I would like that to be significantly darker. So I am going straight into the indigo. I'm using a little less absorbent paintbrush here, so it's picking up less water when I am going to clean my brush. That's looking a bit moodier, looks better. And then I'm just going to take my brush, clean it off, and soften out this edge a little bit here. Maybe bring a little bit more of the lighter blue as well. If you remember, that was the phthalo blue. Maybe just mix that in there. I see, I'm not really looking, because this is a sky, I'm not really looking for evenness. And I think that's something that I've learned over the years with just working with washes. When I first started, I wanted like a digitally smooth gradient with my washes, and I had this obsession about it and about trying to get it perfect and about trying to get it right. And over the years, that attitude has changed completely the other way. Like I want anything but a smooth transition, because these characteristics in Pippi hairs, that's what makes it look interesting. Because this is a very simple painting, so the interest has to be somewhere, and things like that are perfect, and that's why I'm leaving it right there. That is what's going to happen. The idea is, for the rest of these paintings, these are silhouette paintings, so what we are doing in the foreground is going to be black or very, very, very dark. We want to make sure that this is absolutely 100% fully dry before we start messing about, because we need our lines out in front here to be pretty crisp. But in the meantime, I'm just going to keep farting about and adding some more of this. So the next step, while I'm letting that dry, I say this is a sky scene, and we're going to put some things in front of it. I want to have some stars in this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Winsor Newton Designer's gouache. This is the one that I use all the time. I use it for everything, and this is like, I don't know how many tubes of this stuff I've been through. So what we do here is we splodge a little bit out of this into our palette. Now, even if you don't paint in gouache, buying a tube of good quality white gouache it's really handy to have. It has a lot of uses. It's great for things like this because gouache is much more opaque than watercolour, and when it's used neat, it's great for highlights and crisp edges, and we can use it on things like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to use like a splatter technique. You can use like an old toothbrush. I like to use a square paintbrush with quite hard bristles, and I like to go brrrr like that, but against the paper so that it splats on the paper. In order for it to get that nice sort of splat though, we do have to water it down a bit because gouache is very, very thick straight out the tube. So I'm going to get to work doing that. While this is drying, I'll just pop this over slightly so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to squeeze, and I only need a tiny blob. Like a little of this goes a long way. And then I want to add some clean water to that. So this is the brush I'm going to use for my flicking. So I'm just going to plop in some of that there and give this a mix, because we need the paint to be mobile so that we get a good splatter. You can test out your splatter elsewhere. So yeah, you don't want it too watery though, because if you put too much water in it, it becomes more transparent. It becomes a bit more like watercolour. It won't stand out as well on this type of background. So it's a bit of a balancing act. Okay, so we're nice and drying out, and it is time to start flicking. So really load up the brush here and move everything out of the way that you don't want to get the splatter. So I'm just going to cover the bottom half of this. I don't really want anything going on the kind of bottom third. And you can see here I'm just going to like da. So you can have a few big areas like this, and then if you want something a little bit more delicate or you want to give it more depth, you can water this down further, because what that's going to do is it's going to make that transparency that I was talking about earlier, you know, make it more like watercolour. So that's going to let some of the paint show through, and we've got this bottom part that is clean now. Okay, so while we're waiting for that to dry, I can work on the bottom section of this drawing. So for this, I want to use a much firmer brush because I want control and I want quite crisp lines. You can do a foreground and a marker if you're going to do a silhouette like this. I just think it's more fun doing it in paint personally, because you're painting anyway, so like, why would you not? Tend to find that the synthetic brushes are a little bit more stable in terms of the bristles. They're a little bit firmer, so we get a little bit more precision also. So I'm going to grab this big Sea White number 12 here because it's a big daddy, and I am going to be using lamp black for this. So minimal amount of water in your brush, mostly paint. Look at that, soaked up there. And I want to create a ridge here. Bring that down there like this. Ooh. Now again, we can layer this up, so it does not have to be a perfect flat matte layer on the very first pass of paint. This paper is doing a great job, like it is taking water like a boss, so I am absolutely not concerned about hammering a few more layers down, like not at all. Inconsequential, my friends. So I'm also going to grab a much smaller brush now. Here we go, I've got number 2. I'm going to add a little bit of landscaping here. Now I say landscaping, I mean tufts. Literally, they're going to be little lines here and there. And just want to start to add some interest to this. What is going to be the outline here, silhouette area. Maybe there's going to be like a little bush in here. So we can do this effect with quite a dry brush. It's giving you some, a bit more of a softer edge if I just zoom in a wee bit here. Oh, there we go. So this is the part where, I mean, you can let your imagination go wild. Maybe there's a lonely wee twig there, look. Oh, maybe it's got a friend. You can make that as interesting or bare as you want. There's no rules to that. But what I do want to do is I'm going to have a tree, and most of you all know that I like a good tree. So I'm going to plonk it in here. I want to cover up a bit of this splodge because that's quite excessive. So I'm just going to stick with this lamp black. I don't need to do anything even remotely that exciting here. And just get some branches going. So I'm just getting my outline here, you know, like the skeleton of the tree sorted out until I've got a shape that I'm happy with. And then after that, I'm going to go back to this larger brush that I had, the number 12. And I've still got the paint on it from before. And I'm going to use that to start and put in some of the foliage here. So obviously it's very dry now because I've been holding it in my hand that entire time. And you can see the bristles have started to split. Just because it's dry, and obviously I'm not going to batter that in the paper. I don't want to damage the end of it, so I'm going very gently, but I'm just dabbing and use that dryness of the brush to our advantage here. And just start to build this up. Get our tree looking like a tree. It's looking a bit bald at the moment. Obviously there will be a network of branches in here, but we want to keep the simplicity of this picture as much as possible. So that's why I haven't really like gone to town with the branches, so to speak. I say, well, this will be built up enough that we'll know that there's more branches in there. We're just not necessarily showing them at this stage. Now that we've got that sort of base part in, we can switch to a much smaller brush. The other thing that's really good for this is old knackered paintbrushes, you know, ones that are slightly splayed or maybe like they've been cheap pony brushes, that kind of thing. Really good for these kind of effects because you can work a little bit harder with them, like you can be a bit rougher with those, and they will do you a job also. Okay, so I'm going to let that layer dry for a wee minute and we'll add some more in just shortly. While I'm waiting, I want to add in a little, like a tree swing detail here. So I'm going to grab a pencil and I'm going to draw around. This is it. It's actually the rubber stopper off of something unidentified. This seems to happen to me a lot, but I just thought it was the perfect size to draw around for a rope swing. Now, obviously, to make it look like a tire, it has to have some sort of tread on the outside. It doesn't have to be really obvious though, but I do want to make this a bit thicker. So what I've got here now is a tapered brush, sometimes known as a cat's tongue brush. This one came in a scroller box. I really like it, and again, really handy for this sort of thing. If you want to get a certain uniformity in your, like in the shapes that you're making. Beef up our tree a little bit now. So you can see I'm focusing on a section at a time now, and I really just want to make this quite rich and make the tree look quite full. You know, loading up your paintbrush, because it can be quite handy to see once it's actually dried in what it looks like. Okay, so there we have our first little painting all complete. So I'm just going to take this tape off here. Wow. Okay, yeah, so just to show you here with this one, if I do that, look how little that paper has buckled. It's hardly anything at all. There's a slight twist in it, and if I turn it this way, you can see it there, it's a bit more obvious. But I mean, come on, the amount of water that I battered onto that was absolutely crazy. So this paper is amazing. So on that vein, I'm going to turn this round now, and we're going to do our silhouette on our other piece of paper here, just so we've got this nice little set of two. And once I'm finished, I can show you them side by side just for texture comparisons as well, which was kind of why we were doing two as well. Okay, so with this one, this is a little bit different. We're going to have some tree outlines here, as if it's in the foreground though. So just going to get in a little bit of this here. Again, not actually that bothered about this being all that accurate for anything, because it's not actually important, because it is not the focal point of the picture. So we'll just get some of that in there. Now what we want to do is try and soften this out a little bit. So I've got a damp brush here, and I'm just working my way around the edges that I've created there. And then make these darker parts darker again. Okay, and then we're going to create a very low rocky area here. Now I'm just going to take my pencil here. I just want to give myself a very rough outline here, just to make sure that we're going to look semi-sensible. Again, I'm just sticking with this lamp black. So I'm just trying to get this outline here. Obviously I'm working from this reference photo as well. So I'm going to follow this quite closely, this photograph, just because obviously I know it's accurate. Now the nice thing is that when you're doing silhouettes, if you want to err on the side of caution, you can always build it out the way. So you're better to have an area that's too skinny rather than too fat, because you can always continue to work on it and fill it in. And I tend to do that with the face area. When I'm working with a muzzle, I kind of deliberately make it a little bit skinnier, and I think it's probably just a confidence thing, to be honest. Whereas when I'm working in pencil, I wouldn't think twice about it, which is weird. But then again, in pencil we can erase. This not so much. So I'm trying to keep my paint nice and rich and thick here, because he doesn't look much of anything right now. He's just a blob that looks as if he's got 3 legs. Oh. What are you painting in the cave today, Jem? A blob with 3 legs? So now that we've got this outline here, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush, which will let me be more accurate, and for me, in my case, feel more like I'm using a pencil, which obviously I am considerably more comfortable with than a paintbrush. I'll add in some more defining features here and make him look like he's a bit more like he's supposed to look. Oh look, we've got an ear. That's instantly better. Want to build his neck out a little bit more there as well. This is what I was saying about skinny things. See, he looks much more like a deer already. That's hilarious. Fix his little face as well. And we can start to put his antlers in. And this, guys, is exactly like doing trees. Same thing. Go where you want with them. Usually, now I say usually, I'll use that term very, very loosely. Usually, deer will have matching points on their antlers, like the same number of points on each side. Not always the case, though. We don't have any deer now, but we used to have farmed deer. So again, a creature that I'm fairly familiar with. Maybe not to draw right enough. I'm not really into drawing them that often. Well, when I say that, I wouldn't have spent as much time observing deer as I have cows, for example, and dogs. Number one, because Unfortunately, deer are notoriously shy unless you've got farmed deer that are used to being hand fed. Ours were not hand fed. There was maybe one or two that would come to you, but it was, you know, sort of very reluctantly. So unless you have really petted deer, they're quite sort of shy creatures, and they can be quite difficult to study, you know, in the flesh, I mean. I don't think I've ever concentrated so much on black pointy lines in my puff. Do you know that? We are getting there. Concentration. There we go. Excellent. Now that this is dried, I can see that I still need a fair bit of coverage here, so I'm just going to make sure with my lamp black that this is going to be suitably coated. A wee bit of pink peeking through down the bottom here, which I don't want. I want this to be as dark as possible. The other nice thing that you could do this with as well, if you don't want to paint it, you could use some really nice black ink. So many ways. So many ways. And there we have it. So, I am assuming that this paper will be just as buckled as the other one, if not less. But what I do want to show you is the comparison in the textures, because that was one of the things I was quite interested to find out about this Pencilmarch paper. Okay, so there we go. There is our majestic deer. Oh God. And here is our other artwork. So if I can just draw your attention, if I pull this up really close to the camera, it's actually easier than doing it the other way around. Get a bit of autofocus on. The texture on the paper here has shown through in the wash quite substantially. It's nice, it gives us lots of texture as well, and it hasn't really interfered with some of the black paint down the bottom. So we've actually had a really nice mix. But if I show you it next to the deer here, you can see that the wash is just much smoother. The paint has slid about on the paper much more, and it's very even, and it's less granular looking, and it's not granulation in the paint, that is the paper that's done that. So there's a difference in terms of actually using it, you know, as the artist and the preference. I prefer the smoother paper, I prefer the smoother side, I find it easier to work on, but there isn't a significant difference for it to really make a difference for me. So it's one of those ones where if you're not sure which side of the paper you're on, it'll be okay, like it'll be absolutely fine. And so again, just to talk about the buckling, they're like absolutely minimal. I've got a tiny little corner here that started to curl up this way. Again, if I hold it upside down, you can see there that's pretty flat, that's pretty straight. It's just this corner has started to turn up a little bit. That is literally it. And that has had at least 6 or 7 washes on it, not to mention this part here, and so on and so forth. Like this is a lot of water. So this paper has taken it like a boss. So it's definitely getting the thumbs up from the cave. I would highly recommend it. As I said at the beginning, there is the other pad of this, because these pads came in a pack of 2, and that was on Amazon UK. I will never use 2 pads, you know, I'm never going to use 60 sheets of A4 watercolour paper along with all the other paper I've got. So the other one of these is in the stash shop, so it's something that you're interested in trying, then please feel free to head over and grab yourself a bargain. And that is it for today, guys. I've quite enjoyed my little painting session here. I do enjoy a little bit of watercolour, bit of gouache in there, wee bit of silhouette painting. Really simple paintings, but nice to do, very relaxing, had great fun. Hope you've enjoyed yourself too. So until our next video, please stay safe and take care of each other, and I will see you back in the cave really soon for another video. Have a great day, everyone, and bye for now.